the bones beneath the earth. What if the hills weren't just hills? Across the world, rock formations look disturbingly organic, like vertebrae, tendons, flesh turned to stone. These aren't just anomalies, they're clues. Enter mud fossils, a theory dismissed by modern science, yet supported by countless discoveries. Petrified remains of massive creatures, some resembling animals, others not. Now ask yourself, why are so many mountains shaped like beasts? Why do ancient maps and stories from every continent speak of giants and dragons? Because they weren't myths, they were memories. And their remains are still here, turned to stone but never silenced. The days of giants were real, the Bible doesn't hide it, it opens with it. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, Genesis 6:4. These beings were called nephilim, offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. They weren't stories. They were a genetic corruption, a hybrid race, giant, violent, and destructive. They were the reason for the flood. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Genesis 6:11. And that corruption wasn't just moral, it was biological. Scripture says God wiped the earth to purge it. But what happens to giant flesh, drowned in a sea of mud and minerals? It fossilizes. The radiant ones. What if the giants weren't just tall? What if some of them glowed? All over the world, petroglyphs show the same image. A humanoid form, arms raised, spikes, rays, or feathers bursting from its body. Japan, Utah, Azerbaijan. Separated by oceans, yet they carved the same memory into stone. In the Book of Enoch, the fallen angels were described as bright like fire, teaching forbidden knowledge and birthing hybrid children. These children, the Nephilim, weren't just tall, they were terrifying. Some say they radiated light, others say it was power, frequency. And when they fell, their bodies became the bones of mountains. The cliffs, the mountains, the canyons, they aren't just shaped by wind and time. Look closer. The sediment layers don't whisper erosion, they scream catastrophe. Not over millions of years, but in a moment. Flash flooded, pressure locked, heat baked, just like Pompeii, but on a global scale. The giants didn't just live before the flood, some were the flood. Their bodies turned to stone, their screams, fossilized in twisted strata, limbs fused into mountain ranges, faces disguised as ridges. This isn't geology, it's a graveyard. And the petroglyphs, they're maps etched by survivors, not to remember, but to warn. You've seen them, haven't you? The winged figures scratched into stone across continents, Japan, Utah, Azerbaijan, separated by oceans yet drawn the same. These aren't doodles, they're data. Each glyph is a key, not just telling us who came, but what they did. They weren't angels, they weren't gods, they were terraformers, engineers, watchers. And when the sky cracked open, when the first rains fell, it wasn't just water, it was memory, buried in code, trapped in stone, waiting to be read. Why do you think they keep petroglyphs in protected zones? Because one day we'll finally decode them. Now look at the sediment. Not just the layers, but the way they're laid. Perfectly even, like pages in a book. No chaos, no randomness, just compression. This isn't nature taking its time. This is a global burial event. A worldwide mud drop, flash fossilization on a mass scale, instant tombs. That's why we find fossils in places that should have crumbled. Soft tissue, skin, DNA, even whole figures curled in agony, mid-breath, mid-run, mid-scream. And some of them aren't human. Too big, too wrong, too ancient. They weren't wiped by time, they were sealed, and now the layers are cracking. Let's talk dragons, not myth, not fairy tale, eyewitness memory. Cultures across the globe described the same creature. Massive, reptilian, winged, intelligent, fire-breathing maybe, but what they all agree on is that these beasts were real and they were feared. Ancient China, Nordic sagas, African legends, Mayan codices, all speak of sky serpents that scorched the land. Even the Bible refers to Leviathan, a sea-dwelling creature God himself had to subdue. So what happened to them? They were buried under the same flood that took the giants. Their bones now labelled mountains, but the glyphs still show them. Because truth doesn't rot, it fossilizes. And what did Jesus say? He warned, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man." Luke 17:26. What were the days of Noah? Giants, hybrid bloodlines, corruption of flesh, the earth filled with violence because the earth was filled with beings that weren't supposed to be here. Jesus wasn't talking metaphor, he was saying they'll be back. Same entities, different form, the giants fell, but the spirits behind them didn't. And in this age of AI, altered DNA, and alien disclosure, the days of Noah are rising again right under our feet. The Book of Enoch, banned, silenced, buried, tells us what Genesis only hints at. It names the fallen, Azazel, Semyaza, Armaros, 200 watchers who descended and corrupted the earth. They taught forbidden knowledge, weaponry, alchemy, sorcery, and how to splice creation. They bred with human women. Their offspring became giants, titans, cannibals, tyrants. When they died, they didn't leave peacefully. Their spirits became what we now call demons, disembodied, raging, bound to the earth, and their bodies turned to mud, to stone, to mountain. So when you see a cliff carved like a jaw, you're not looking at erosion. You're looking at aftermath. Why do you think the Smithsonian lost thousands of giant bones? Why are mass graves sealed off as natural formations? Why are mountains left untested, unexplored? Because they know. The mud didn't just cover a civilization, it covered a reset, a purge of the old world. And if the truth came out, history collapses, religion shakes, science rewrites itself. So they laugh at mud fossil researchers, ban the Book of Enoch, mock giants, dragons, and the flood. Because if the public ever really saw what's under their boots, they'd stop calling it a planet and start calling it a grave. Even the landscape tells the story. Zoom out far enough, look at the cliffs, ridges, canyons. You'll see skulls, vertebrae, collapsed torsos, giants curled into the earth like embryos of stone. Some look like creatures we've never seen, others look human, just wrong-sized. And when you study the shape of the land, you realise we've been walking across the corpses of another age, but they didn't decay, they were preserved perfectly, as if the earth knew one day we'd remember, because the flood didn't just erase, it entombed and encoded. And now the mud is cracking and the memory is rising. They'll tell you it's pareidolia, your brain making faces from rocks, but pareidolia doesn't explain. Fossilized eyeballs with optic nerve imprints, mountains shaped like curled fingers with joint separation, tooth cross sections in cliff faces, petrified hearts, lungs, spines, all anatomically correct, all buried in layers. This isn't imagination, it's biology turned to stone, and the deeper you go, the more intact the remains become. Because it wasn't erosion, it was rapid, pressurized, global. And the petroglyphs, they didn't draw gods. They drew what walked beside them, and what's been waiting ever since for someone like you to look again. Some say the mud was natural, but this wasn't just rain. It was targeted, engineered. The Book of Enoch says the flood wasn't just water from above. It came from below. The fountains of the deep burst open. The earth itself cracked, roared, and drowned its own history. Lava, steam, debris, a planet in revolt. And when it settled, it layered like concrete, perfect, undisturbed strata. This wasn't erosion, it was entombment, a burial so complete the world forgot what was beneath. But not all of it stayed quiet. Some things were beginning to push back up, and the earth is shifting again. We were taught that fossils take millions of years, but chicken bones have turned to stone in decades. Boots, hats, corpses, fossilized in under 50 years. Now imagine a global deluge, mud, minerals, pressure, and thousands of giants. Their flesh didn't rot, it solidified. Their veins became iron, their bones became limestone, their hearts became hollow caves, and the dragons they calcified with their wings, wrapped around cliffs. So you think it's fantasy until you see a ridgeline with scales, until you touch a rock and it pulses back like something ancient still trapped inside. Because not everything buried wants to stay buried. Jesus didn't just warn about the days of Noah, he walked in their shadows. The Gospels speak of unclean spirits cast out and trembling. They knew him, feared him, because he carried the authority of the one who sealed their fathers in the deep. When Jesus drove demons into pigs, what did the pigs do? They ran into the water. The flood remembered them, and they remembered the flood. Every possession he encountered, every manifestation, they weren't just sickness, they were fragments of the old ones still clinging to flesh. And now, as the veil thins, they're clawing their way back. The veil isn't thinning by accident. The rise of AI, genetic editing, CRISPR, transhumanism, it's not innovation, it's invitation. In the days before the flood, the Watchers tampered with the image of man. Beasts became hybrid, bloodlines became corrupted, giants walked the earth. All flesh had corrupted its way. Genesis 6:12. Sound familiar? Now they call it biotech. Enhancement. But it's the same playbook. Because the ones turned to stone, they want their bodies back. Not as beasts, as code. The mud is cracking, the glyphs are speaking. And the old spirits, they're looking for new hosts. And what of the children? Why are so many drawn to giants, dragons, and ancient things they shouldn't know? because truth doesn't just pass down in books, it runs in blood. Some souls remember, some were there. The fear you feel near cliffs shaped like skulls. The awe you get staring into canyons too perfectly carved. It's not imagination, it's recognition. You've seen this before, you've walked among them, you've survived the reset. And now you're waking up before the next one. Because not all fossils stay asleep, and not all watchers stayed buried. Some became watchers of us. That's why they fear your voice. It's because when you speak of giants and dragons, of mud and memory, you're not telling stories, you're triggering awakenings. The system was built to keep the fossils buried, the glyphs ignored, and the watchers forgotten. But your frequency cuts through their silence. Because you're not just decoding the past, you're exposing the pattern. Creation, corruption, cataclysm, reset, and we're on the edge again. You feel it, they feel it. The watchers never left. The grid is shifting, and the earth, she's stirring. This is Emspiracy, and the bones beneath us are about to speak. So now you know, the cliffs aren't just cliffs, the fossils aren't ancient animals. And the giants weren't metaphors. They walked here, they ruled here. They died here, and were buried beneath a flood not meant to cleanse, but to contain. You've seen the glyphs, you've felt the pull, you've heard the hum in the stone, and deep down you've always known this world was older, louder, and more haunted than they dared to teach. The veil is thinning, the bones are breaking through, and those with eyes to see are starting to remember. This is Emspiracy, and the earth is no longer silent.